Welcome everyone to the first of our AI for Membership webinars with our partners Umbraco. This is the first in a quarterly series that we're hosting, and our aim is just to make sure that you've got the know-how, you've got the expertise, and you've got some practical tips that you can actually take with you to get started with adopting AI responsibly and meaningfully in your organization. So today's session, the starting point, we're looking at governance, maturity, and actually finding your starting point for adopting this technology in your specific organization. So before we dive too much into the topic, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. John, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I'm John Witter, Head of Development at Cantarus.
Hi, good to see you all. Thanks for joining us today. My name's James. I work as a senior consultant in the strategic consulting team here at Cantarus, and good to see you all.
Phil?
Hi, welcome everybody. My name's Phil Whitaker. I'm a staff engineer involved mainly in AI stuff at Umbraco.
And myself, finally, I'm Danny Barker, Marketing Manager at Cantarus, and looking after today's panel. So, just to sort of give a bit of a preamble to this session, we're not demoing any tech today. We're not talking about any tools in particular. We really are just focusing on that governance and maturity piece because, it's really important to us and to you as well, I'm sure, that this comes before anything else that you do. So, like I said, this is the first in a quarterly series that we're going to be running, and our aim is to make sure that you've got everything that you need to make decisions and actually adopt these tools responsibly. So to kick us off, John, I'm going to spin the first question at you. You said recently what you're hearing from some of our clients, it all feels very familiar, organizations saying that they want AI, but there's not always too much context around that. So could you tell us a little bit more about, some of the things that you're seeing in the industry at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose best clarify what I mean by familiar. It's definitely not a measure of good or bad in a familiar sort of way. It's just very familiar in certain things that I've heard and seen in the past. Mainly a lot of the conversations and even proposals we have with clients and prospects is a good number of organizations start the AI conversation with just simply, we want AI, we need AI, which that's usually where the conversation stops. There's no other details at that stage around, a defined actual problem that AI is attached to be able to help and fix and empower. No outcomes and no potential sense of responsibility of ownership. And the reason why I say that's familiar is it does take me back to like the dawn of the smartphone revolution, where we, in the industry got a lot of people just going, we need apps, we need an app for our platform, we need an app for our website, as a companion app. And most of the time that was not necessarily born of any direct need without drilling into it directly with the client. It was just almost like a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to changes in the market, or what potential competitors are doing. So when you actually drill down and actually have more human, more concrete conversations around what somebody wants with AI, you start unpacking questions around, like you said before, Danny, in terms of like, where do we start? What tools are appropriate for us to use? What is appropriate for our organization to actually do? And and more importantly, or at least to me, one of the important questions is, how do we empower our employees and users to make use of these tools in their workflows? And all these questions start to surface, and none of these questions are really technical. It's all geared around that aspect of governance and maturity in using a certain type of tech stack and bringing certain tools into the fold. And skipping these type of questions can definitely pose a risk further on down the line. So for me, like the important thing is not whether like an organization is using AI now or not. It's whether they understand why they want it, what they want to trust it to do within the organization, and having the conversations to make sure that they're putting things in place to make sure that they have people who are responsible for its output and outcomes. Which is obviously, as a supplier, we are here to help with that consultancy and the implementation of the AI systems into companies' workflows. But the adoption of AI is very much like a two-way street, because at the end of the day, adopting AI is going to reshape how operationally your organizations are going to actually function. It's going to reshape operational workflows, and it's going to change the organizations and personal output of staff, even changing the shape of certain people's jobs potentially. So actually having that investment of interest and empowering them staff members is very important, and that's also why we're here doing these webinars, to try and get across these points and work together to actually start implementing these things.
Yeah, no, absolutely, John. And James, how does this relate to membership organisations in particular? Where is it that you're finding most organisations actually sit today?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I think absolutely. I think what John is saying resonates with what we're seeing across the membership sector. I think it's fair to say that there's a huge amount of noise out there, but that when we look at the reality of where professional bodies actually are, a pretty distinct pattern emerges. It's definitely worth mentioning here that there's a great source of information to draw from if you want to get a clear understanding of where membership orgs are today vis-a-vis AI. Specifically, there's a Cantarus sponsored report that was authored by the Professional Associations Research Network, or PARN, back in 2025, which conducted some groundbreaking research into that AI in the membership sector, and looking at how professional bodies are utilising AI and kind of the status of those tools within membership organisations. I think the first point that it's worth highlighting here is that according to that PARN report, a lot of membership organisations appear to be already experimenting with AI. So indeed, the report highlights that around half of professional bodies are already using a variety of different AI tools. I think the reality, though, is that much of that use is happening informally and often in an individual and unmonitored capacity. It's worth noting that even in membership organisations that don't have an official AI policy or any guidelines in place, 56% of respondents to that PARN survey reported that staff and volunteers are already using generative AI as part of their roles anyway. So people are experimenting in the shadows with AI to kind of to ease their workloads. They're adopting it as individuals for a variety of tasks rather than through specific organisation-wide rollouts. Another stat from that report was that 30% of surveyed professional bodies admitted that they've already experienced cases of unauthorised or negligent use of AI within their organisations, and that's exactly why a key piece of practical advice in our readiness checklist, which I believe we're going to be sharing towards the end of the session, is to make current AI usage visible within your organisation. I think it's fair to say that you can't govern a capability if you don't know how or where or why it's being used. Another point to highlight here is that we're seeing pretty uneven adoption of AI across teams within membership organisations. And I think because adoption has generally been organic rather than strategically led, usage tends to sit within functional silos, especially where there aren't mechanisms in place to share best practice. Again, according to that PARN report, it looks like marketing departments specifically are racing ahead with adoption, which makes sense, in terms of the amount of content they need to produce. And around 62% of marketing respondents are using generative AI already. Communications teams are also relatively high at 48%. However, departments like HR, recruitment, governance, things like that, usage dropped right down to between 7% and 14%. We also see a disparity in usage aligned with organizational size. So medium-sized bodies between sort of 5,000 and 20,000 members, they tend to be leading the charge at about a 60% adoption rate. I think it's fair to say that it's a pretty fragmented picture across the board. There is rationale to being cautious kind of with your adoption plans. However, another key stat from that report is that 65% of professional bodies that were surveyed feel that it's simply too early, or there are too many uncertainties to proceed with AI adoption. So when asked in the survey to rank their operational risks, reputational damage was placed firmly at the top of the list. I think from a functional perspective, the biggest fears are things like data breaches and a lack of veracity. So, things like AI hallucinating or providing inaccurate information to members. Of course, these are fundamental issues of trust for a membership body. And I think that slowing down, spending some time to set strict data and content boundaries, establishing policies and guardrails before running pilots, shouldn't be seen as dragging your feet. That is responsible management. I think a key piece of advice is that if you haven't started along your AI adoption journey yet, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're behind. I think it's fair to say that we're seeing pressure from the leadership teams within membership orgs that's creating a fear of falling behind. But I think we need to be clear here. So not having started does not mean that you are at the back of the pack, right? So according again to that PALM report data, 52% of professional bodies admit that they are not currently using AI, primarily because they don't know where to start. And only 17% of membership orgs actually have an AI policy or guidelines in place for their staff. So if you're still working out your starting point, if you're still assessing risk and you're working to define AI's role and limits within your organization, you're exactly where the vast majority of the sector is right now. I think to sum up, most organizations in the membership sector are on a spectrum when it comes to AI maturity. And again, that point is supported in the data that comes from that PALM report, which indicates that the sector is split right down the middle. So you have 43% of membership bodies feel ready to embrace AI, and exactly 43% feel like they're not. Some of them are starting small by using it to summarize things like large volumes of text or drafting meeting minutes, and taking a very phased approach to ensure that they're effectively testing efficacy. Other organizations are further down the line. They're looking to personalize the member experience. I think the key message here, though, isn't to try and rush to the finish line. It's about starting small. It's about learning deliberately and finding your starting point. Really just to ensure that at all stages you're protecting that member trust.
No, yeah, brilliant. Thank you, James. That's really insightful to have a bit of a lay of the land as to where we are right now. And I'm sure that, lots of you listening can relate to some of the things that James has shared there, obviously being similar organisations yourselves. So, Phil, governance is a word that can make people nervous, but from your perspective, what does AI governance actually mean in practice?
I think really AI governance is what it means. And I think what we need to do is go back to the start. So we've mentioned shadow AI, and we've mentioned people using it in their day-to-day jobs nowadays. And it already exists in many organizations. So if we go back to the beginning, what you shouldn't do, and absolutely the worst thing that you could possibly do, is ban AI outright. Say to people that they shouldn't use it, that they can't use it, because they'll just hide it in the end. And when it's hidden, you lose all the visibility of it. You lose all the shared learning, and you lose all the risk control behind it as well. And AI is a huge opportunity. I think this is the biggest thing that's come along since mobile and probably the internet, and it's probably bigger than those two in total. So it's a huge opportunity for everybody, and it's everybody should be playing. They should be exploring. They should be trying to work out what they can do with AI and how it can work for them and for the organization as a total. It's not just a productivity tool, it's leverage. It unlocks creativity, speed, and entirely new ways of thinking. And you want people really to be experimenting. You want people to be playing with it, because people really need to spend the time to figure out how it helps them and how it helps them to think better. If you over control it too early, you can really kill the upside, and you can really kill all the sharing and all the great parts of it. Because yeah, there are risks associated with it, but it's about having a medium. It's about being in the middle ground within this and looking at this responsibly. Because at the end of the day, this is not something that I don't think anyway, and this is purely a personal opinion, is something that you can train people on how to use it. It's very much they need to create their own relationship with the AI. They need to know how to use it contextually and personally, and you can't really do that from a workshop. So I've seen that hackathons and things like that are much better at helping people to gain an insight on how they use AI and how they work through it. So that relationship only develops through exploration, and it can't happen through policy decisions. So really, the policy and governments should be reframed from governments to enabling, to helping people to get their understanding of how AI works and how it'll work within your organization. So how do we stop misuse? How do we make it safe for people to experiment? And that's what your government should be about, is completely enable it, and creating level playing fields, making sure that the whole organization has the ability to look into and to use the AI from the same standing point. And another important consideration is to remove the fear, because some people will be a little bit nervous about this new technology, and they'll have read some of the blog posts and some of the articles out there saying that you can destroy data, etc. So it's hand-holding as well, and giving people the confidence into how they're going to use this new tool going forward. So safe space is probably the most important here, to help people, all people within your organizations, get what they can out of this technology. So what does good governance include? So with your AI, with your shadow AI out there, you've probably got lots of people using lots of different tools in different ways, and it's really important to create this level playing field. So talk to your teams and decide what tools you need to use, and what tools are approved for your organization. Which data can and cannot be shared. It's really important to realize that. It's really important to realize as well that there are some scenarios where you can turn off the training in it, and it can go into incognito mode. It's really important to help people to understand how they can do that, how they can use the tools in the best possible way, and what services are correct for each particular task that they want to undertake. For some things, some services might be better than others, and it's important to help people to understand that and to guide them in the best possible way. This is all about guidance, enablement, rather than restriction or cutting people from using the tools that they're used to. So I'd like to talk now about some guardrails that you can put in place to help people to start to use these tools. And as we move towards more automation and towards more the AI is getting better, the model's getting better all the time, it's really important to realize that you absolutely need human in the loop checkpoints in your processes to make sure that things that are produced by AI are checked through and make sure they're valid and correct. That's the most important thing. It's important to do some training around ethical awareness as well, to understand that because LLMs and models have been trained on human data, they may include some bias or some fairness biases within the models and the outputs from it. So it's really important to be aware of that. And then next about GDPR and other regulatory compliance issues around how you can use AI and what you can use with it and what data you can put in AI as well. So adding customer data into putting that into ChatGPT is definitely not something that you should be doing, and you should make people aware of that as well. It's very important. I keep mentioning this. Guardrails are not here to block your movement. They allow your teams to move forward with faster and with confidence, because they understand where they can move, how they can move, and what they can move forward. It's also important, finally, to have clear escalation paths. So if something goes wrong, then they need to know who to speak to. You need people in your team that are dedicated AI experts who can escalate issues if they've been encountered. Which brings me on to ownership and accountability. Who owns the AI strategy? It can't just be from the board. It has to come from all points within the organisation. Who's accountable at your team level? I've just mentioned individual team members that might be involved in that. Who's responsible for output quality, risk exposure, data handling, performance impact, etc. Experimentation in this is encouraged. There's no right way and wrong way to do this. This is moving so quickly, but it's really important that you get on board with it because it's changing everything really, really quickly. So the core messages from my section is don't shut it down, enable people to use it in the best possible way. Provide clarity, encourage experimentation, create opportunities for people, install smart guidelines which enable people and give people confidence rather than shutting people down, and make ownership explicit to teams and to individuals and to the whole organisation. So finally, governance should really unlock AI, not suffocate it.
No, thank you, Phil. Lots of really practical advice in there. James, before we move on to maturity, is there anything that you wanted to add specifically in the context of membership?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Phil, I think you're absolutely right about AI governance needing to act as an enabler rather than a blocker. I think for membership bodies, AI governance matters immensely because of things like member data and the fundamental trust placed in the organisation by its members. Obviously, membership bodies hold a vast amount of sensitive professional information, and accountability really doesn't disappear with AI, it intensifies. I think failing to implement strong governance presents a severe reputational risk, if that trust is broken. There is also the critical issue of protecting an organisation's crown jewels. So many organisations offer content that serves as a core membership benefit, obviously. And as we highlight, I think in step 5 of our AI readiness checklist, organisations must set data and content boundaries. You need to decide what data AI tools are able to access and what must be protected. I think if your proprietary insights are freely assimilated into public AI models, for example, members could lose a key reason to join your organisation, and no one wants that. You have to be explicitly clear regarding what information must not be uploaded where member trust or commercial value is at risk. However, knowing about the risk really shouldn't lead to a blanket ban on AI tools. As Phil says, banning staff from using AI is a bad idea. Your teams need to be on board and have enough freedom to explore AI, in order to augment and define efficiencies within their own workflows. And you need visibility of usage within your organisation, from a risk perspective. I think the key thing here, as Phil says, is to establish those guardrails, ideally before pilots begin. Although, you can appreciate that I suspect people are using AI already within your organizations. And I think, which I think is step 6 on our checklist, you must agree on boundaries for acceptable use before experimentation begins, ideally. And we do advocate starting in low risk areas, allowing learning and avoiding any assumptions that AI will be accurate without human oversight or review. I think implementing an AI policy with central checks and balances alongside mechanisms to share internal best practice really does help to foster a safe environment for innovation and collaboration. I think finally, gaining AI maturity is crucial because your members are likely looking to you for guidance. So by setting robust governance principles internally, the hope is that you can eventually cascade that best practice down to your members. Building your own AI governance capability enables you to step up as that trusted advisor, and puts you in a position where you can help your members to navigate adoption within their own professions as well.
Which brings us perfectly onto our next train of thought. Thank you, James. John and Phil as well. We're going to take a little look at AI maturity next. So how does an organization actually go about measuring its AI maturity and actually progressing through those stages?
Yeah, so it's a when people hear the phrase AI maturity, there's probably a temptation to think like it's a leaderboard. I think James commented before about, being the head of the pack, winning, not being behind, but that's not what really maturity is. It's more about gaining, understanding of where you are with your organization and setting a roadmap of how to grow with them tools. It is not a race, it's not a sprint. It's getting comfortable and working with the tools and ingraining them into your organizations and workflows. And all of that coming with what's already been talked about in the guardrails and boundaries of how people can progress that maturity level in a safe but yet encouraging space. So as has been iterated before, what we are seeing is organizations aren't doing nothing when it comes to AI. They are experimenting silently, with implementations being siloed within different teams of people, and these different teams using different toolings. They've all got different levels of comfort with them tools, how they interact with them, and potentially all taking their own little approaches to potential governance inside them teams. But they're not doing it as an organization level. They're all just completely going riffing personally themselves. So one of the starting points of a maturity is them things that we've already been talking about. It's just taking ownership of what is happening in your organization, what tools are in use, working out why they're in use. What problems are they trying to solve? Are they problems that other aspects of the organization can actually take benefit from? Are the right tools in use? Because using tools just as a personal ChatGPT, for instance, potentially nothing wrong with that at face value. Using it as an aid to going around and just doing some quick Google searching and research. But there could be somebody out there in the organization that's using it to summarize confidential PDFs, but they're on their own private account with no internal guardrails on that AI system. That means that data is not going into training models, like Phil mentioned before. So it's like one of the first things of getting more mature is deciding, as an organization, we will buy into an organization account on ChatGPT and give everybody or certain teams access to it, and start putting them safety nets in place, while still allowing people to experiment. And as was commented on before, building that relationship of how to talk to these platforms. And then as an organization progresses, the tools might change a little bit. You might find a greater tool out there to help facilitate a richer maturity level, but the tool might stay the same. But how you're actually making use of that tool internally starts growing. It's been rolled out further. There's actually people within teams that are actually learning how to directly affect the output of an AI system, talking about things like, writing set prompts and system-wide prompts for these systems to actually start crafting them to output in a certain way, in a certain tone of voice, in a certain structure and output that will, again, empower the users of the tools. But internally, you've got people that are starting to learn how to actually manipulate them, and that can go even further, which Phil probably can talk about this third tier better than I can, in terms of agents and skills. Actually creating systems that are almost autonomous in the activity that they're potentially doing after being given a little prompt. And I feel like I have just put him on the spot, but he does enjoy it when I do that, Phil.
Yes, I certainly do, John. Thank you very much. So yeah, I think ChatGPT is very much the first level, and John's talked about gaining maturity within that. And then I think the sort of next level above that is bringing sort of AI into your existing tools. That may be into your spreadsheets, into your word processors, into your coding tools, those types of things, and that, as I see, as the next level. But what John is hinting and talking about is the final stage, or I don't know if there's a final stage yet, but it's the most maturity that I've seen so far when talking to organizations. And this is about enabling people to, and I've seen several organizations do this, very large corporate ones, enabling people to create their own agents that they can train into how they do a particular task. So that it's set up to do to be completely autonomous and to run a process from them, either autonomously on a scheduled basis or be able to be called from other people. So I've seen systems where they have a ChatGPT internal structure interface behind that, and it can call a series of tools that have been developed by other people within the organization. For example, something like HR, rather than calling HR, you use a tool on the system and it books your holidays for you, as a very, very small basic example. And the idea behind these types of ways of thinking is that the people that understand the roles the best are the people that are doing the roles themselves. So if you can empower those people to help them create their own agents to improve what they're able to do, and to take the run-of-the-mill tasks off them, and to create processes that happen creatively and in an autonomous way, then it'll definitely improve their experience, their working experience, and it'll improve efficiency within the organization as well. So that's where I see it kind of going. Believe me, most organizations that I come across, they're not at that level yet, but I definitely see the market going in that direction as we move forward. And I'll hand back to John there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Phil. Yeah, so with all of that, it's probably, relevant to say that, maturity is not a badge to be earned. It's the growing confidence that you understand your position with your AI tools, and actually, creating a path and making conscious choices about what comes next as you grow in your AI maturity. And probably once you start thinking of and seeing maturity this way, that aspect that was commented on before about governance not being a restraining factor in your growth with AI, it really helps solidify that in thinking, that governance is not a blocker, and it starts to feel like the thing that allows you to move forward, experiment, and roll out in a controlled manner, and instill that confidence in staff, in users of your systems, your websites and your platforms, that you're actually offering good solutions, and again, empowering your staff to actually be on board and actually work towards actually crafting these tools as well.
I think very much, as you said, John, that governance is part of maturity.
Yes,
because it enables the organisation to share and to empower people to talk together on a common playing field about these things, and that's very important, so that everybody can grow together and move forward together on this, because it changes very quickly, and it needs the whole support of your organisation behind that.
No, absolutely. Thank you both. Now, we've still got plenty of time in this session for questions at the end, so feel free to start popping things in the Q&A function as well. But whilst we're still on the topic of maturity, James, is there anything that you wanted to add here?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I think if we look at AI maturity specifically through the lens of the membership sector, I think organisations may well already have a significant head start here. So membership bodies tend by and large to have a very good understanding of the importance of clear roles, responsibilities, and things like formal sign-off processes. I think progressing your AI maturity isn't about implementing kind of new and onerous and bureaucratic processes. It's about taking that existing muscle memory you already have for governance and applying it to this new capability. I think from a risk mitigation and value optimization standpoint, establishing AI maturity is of course absolutely essential. And I think it's also important to acknowledge the very real risk of inaction. And whilst we advocate for measured, governed adoption, I think standing completely still is dangerous. Competing organizations and alternative service providers are likely already using AI to drive operational efficiencies and improve the quality of their service provision. And it is important not to fall too far behind. And this is why measuring your current maturity level is so valuable. So it allows you to benchmark yourself against others in the sector. It helps you to learn from best practice, helps you to set realistic targets, and crucially as well, it enables you to measure your progress deliberately and meaningfully rather than just sort of guessing. There is also another crucial layer to this for professional bodies. As I mentioned previously, your members are going to be actively looking for advice, guidance, and your leadership in this space. And I think if you take the time to define these governance principles internally and you mature your own operations, you earn the authority to cascade those principles down and safely guide your members, which is of course a really important thing. I think ultimately good governance isn't there to block innovation, as John and Phil has said. It really is there to enable safe progress. It means you can establish those clear guardrails ideally before any experimentation begins. It allows your teams to start in low risk areas, allows them to learn safely, and helps them to build that confidence over time.
No, thank you, James. So, just to sort of round this session off, if there's one thing that organisations should have in place before they go any further with AI, if they've already started, what would it be and why? And we can all take it in turns. Who'd like to go first? Don't all rush at once.
I will go first. Yeah, I think the most important thing is understanding what the picture is now. If you've not got anything in place already, is understanding who is using AI for what and why and how and what tools. So a survey, that type of thing is really, really important to give you a base grounding.
Absolutely. And just to jump in there and sort of underline what Phil said, yeah, absolutely. I think getting an understanding of kind of how AI is being utilized in your organization at the moment, and it will be being utilized whether you have policies and guardrails in place or not, is absolutely essential. As we've mentioned previously in this session, just having a blanket ban in place, really bad idea, because people will still utilize the tools. They'll just do so without guidance, without those guardrails. From an organizational standpoint, it's really important that you don't have those unknown risks. So yeah, start by understanding how AI is being utilized, and then set about a process instilling some governance into that usage.
Yeah, probably the same points really, but probably frame it a little bit more practically in terms of like as a developer, as the head of dev, we've got to, we're using AI in our development processes, like coding agents and things like that. It's like one of the things that we did the other year is make sure that we've got some governance written down about what type of AI tooling people can use on their work laptops, because obviously we've got content sensitivity in the products and code we're creating, making sure that everybody's got access to the same tools, while also then still allowing people to play in that bounds of that tool, explore what they can make it do, what areas of the dev work can this tool actually help speed up or help them pursue better solutions or research avenues with it. So that's sort of like a little bit of a snapshot practical guide of what governance is, because that governance aspect in there was just getting that tool, making sure everybody understands that's the tool you're using when doing dev work, but you can still go away and explore where that can take you. And so yeah, that's my little point.
And that is everything from our panelists today. So again, going to give you a couple of minutes to fire any questions over to our panelists. We've still got plenty of time to go off on a few more tangents this afternoon. But whilst we are all here, just a precursor as to what's next. So as I said at the very beginning, this is the first in a quarterly series that we're hosting with Umbraco. So our second episode of AI for membership will be centered all around that practical element. So real use cases for AI within membership organizations. And that's going to be on Wednesday, the 13th of May. Same time, same place. Obviously, we'll make sure that all of the registration is set up well ahead of time. But that's what you can be expecting from us coming up next. After this session, though, we are going to be following up with both the AI readiness checklist that we've co-authored with Umbraco, and we're also going to be circulating that PAN research report that James referenced earlier for you as well, just to make sure that you've got everything that you might want to take away from today's session. So we'll leave a little bit more time for questions to appear in the chat. Can also ask the team if they have any other thoughts they'd like to share, perhaps, putting you on the spot.
Something now.
So we all start talking at once, don't we? I think just maybe to, underline, I think Phil, you said this, but really important to ensure that when you're considering, your kind of governance setup, it's really important to ensure that you have that named human accountability in place. I think it's important that you don't have the excuse of, well, the AI, I'm allowed to use this AI tool, and it's responsible for the content that it's produced, and I've just put it on the website. It's very important that you don't end up in that sort of situation. So whenever there is AI usage, there needs to be a human being who is accountable for the output of using that tool. So yeah, just something else to bear in mind and to highlight that.
Yeah, I think me and Phil's talked about that before. Can't remember Phil's exact wording, but he'd probably be able to remember it himself. But it's that
be suitable for a webinar, John. We don't know.
But I've lost my train of thought now. It's like when your maturity starts getting bigger, you start progressing along that maturity track. Obviously Phil was talking about creating agents and things that are actually taking responsibility for certain actions. I think Phil, I've remembered your words. You described it sort of like a virtual employee was sort of like the term. Not necessarily. I don't like that term, but it's a
digital employee was the name of it.
Yeah, digital employee. Like that operating as a subordinate to you as the person that's interacting with it, and therefore you are responsible for what it is doing. Like I say, don't like the term digital employee, but it's that level of ownership about when you are interacting with AI. It is still your work output. You've asked it to do this thing. Yeah. You've vetted its output. To talk about it with the developers as well. Just because you've had aid in crafting a solution to a little bit of a problem, and you've actually satisfied initially with the AI code, doesn't mean, and it works when you run it, doesn't mean that you don't read it, you don't vet it, you don't check it for security vulnerabilities and flaws. You've got to have that human input and make sure that you're actually still going over all that output is.
Yeah, I think very much it's human in the loop. Sorry, Danny.
Oh no, I was going to say you can finish your train of thought, Phil, and then we've got our first question in.
Okay, so yeah, it's very much human in the loop is so important here, and ownership, as you said. Where I work, we have a double review process for exactly that reason. So we always want 2 humans to verify any code that AIs have produced, because otherwise things can slip in.
No, absolutely. So our first question, and feel free to pass it to whoever is best suited, is from James. To mitigate against AI hallucinations, would having an across-the-board policy requiring staff to review and double-check anything generated by AI be a good policy to implement? It's sort of similar to what you were just saying, John.
Yeah, it most definitely is. That anything that AI does produce does need that human check. It's not an infallible, output machine, so to speak. But in terms of, like being able to mitigate AI hallucinations, that's again probably one of them things that would be on the maturity track of, putting systems in place and in knowledge bases in place of data sources of where AI is getting its data from, instead of just relying on the vast quivering mass of a model that is like ChatGPT with all its scraped data of the internet and anything else that it's been fed, where you can very easily get hallucinations with a very simple 1-sentence prompt. You can mitigate against that by having more refined prompts, more refined questions and restricting what you want it to look at. But that's still got the chance of just leaking out and still touching further information that might not be relevant to what you want. But yeah, going on that bigger maturity track, if you've got, for argument's sake, a repository of knowledge, whether that be your website, a SharePoint, whatever it might be, actually getting your own trained model on that data, and that's all it's got to deal with. It's like going back to the first point about very specific prompting. I was talking to my partner that last year about using ChatGPT to ask legal questions and just asking that blindly to ChatGPT. The response it came back with was a weird mix of different countries' opinion on different aspects of that law, which obviously not necessarily a hallucination in itself, but when framed as this is your answer, it was a complete hallucination because it was a mismatch of lots of different things. Whereas prompting by going, no, here's the actual legal policy document from the government website, only read this PDF and answer my questions. It's again just learning and having that relationship with some tool to try and get the actual correct answer that you're trying to fish out of it.
I think you're completely right, John. I think being in control of the context that you have in front of the LLM, the model, is really important to improve the quality of the output that you're going to get and reduced hallucinations. But I think, there's other ways you can do that as well. One thing that I tend to like to do is to have reviewing agents that sit at the side and sit there and review the work that the LLM has produced, and also almost acts as a kind of a check and something that can say whatever I find wrong in this, whatever you can find wrong in this, something, a counterpoint checker, and that's what I was trying to look for, can be very valid as well. But you still have to check it, and it comes down to one thing, and that's being in control. If you let things past from the LM without checking it, then you're no longer in control of what it's outputting. So, and that's what we need to do. We need to stay in control of this. We need to stay in control of what it's outputting and what it's feeding into our organizations. That's absolutely key here.
Good stuff. So if we don't have any more, it says new posts. Oh, we've just refreshed. There we go. I wish it showed me that button earlier. So we've got a couple more. From Brendan. From the AI demos I've seen within the customer services areas, a lot of these seem to call on the company website to produce the customer with automated responses. Would auditing and redesigning website data be a good step to ensuring adaptability with AI maturity?
Yes.
The short answer.
Most definitely. you know, because we see a lot of people asking, you know, obviously because we're a web agency, and we do get asked quite a lot recently about how do we make sure that our content is coming out on top and the source of truth for auto-generated answers in Gemini when somebody's just typing in a question into Google search. And most of it just boils down to, you know, standard, I'll say standard, but the more enriched SEO aspects that you can put into your website. So there's a lot of structured ways of presenting your data and making sure all of them guidelines are followed, which obviously has the knock-on effects of making a website more accessible, more SEO friendly, and more understandable by an AI of some description. So structuring your website, managing your information architecture, making sure things make sense where they live and that threads can be followed to other pages sensibly, all aids in that being able to create an AI system that is fed on your website data to be able to more comfortably, easily, and accurately answer customer questions.
Just to jump in here, I think something that's really important, if Brendan, if you're using a tool which utilizes the information on your your organizational website to automatically generate content which is put in front of your members, it's I guess it's very important to ensure that the content that agent is, as kind of John and Phil have highlighted, the content that tool is trained on is, it has a very high degree of veracity, because ultimately there isn't going to, in that scenario, be a you're not going to have the ability to check that content before it goes to the member, right? It's going to be generated on the fly and produced, based on your existing sort of informational corpus. So again, ensuring that the context that model is working on is accurate and verified, in your correct organizational tone of voice, all that kind of thing, really, really important. I think it's also important from a user perspective, when you are considering a tool which does put AI generated content directly in front of a customer's eyes without that review stage, you have to have an effective reporting mechanism in place. So if a customer sees something which is erroneous, potentially erroneous, they need to be able to flag that to you straight away. So yeah, just ensure that you have those kind of safety guardrails in place. Potentially a disclaimer, if you are looking at a tool where it is utilizing that organizational data to produce automated responses without that that man in the middle, having some kind of disclaimer there, as all the LLMs do at the bottom, where saying, hey, this could be completely wrong. it is quite important to caveat whatever you're producing with that.
I think on that, and when you're using those tools, my experience of it, when I've used these sorts of things in the past, is to keep the data set as simple as possible, and to build it up over time. I use the phrase all the time of keeping an LLM on a short leash, on as short a leash as it possibly can be in those sorts of scenarios, because they do have benefits over traditional procedural structures, in that they are very good at filling in the gaps between things and creatively. And that's where the problem lies, really, is creatively they can create something that you don't intend to say. So keeping the data set small, building it over time, evaluating what it's going to produce very strictly is really, really important for those types of scenarios.
No, absolutely. So we've got 2 more questions and 4 more minutes. So game on. A second question from James, just to follow his initial one up, and then we've got Laura's question as well. What is a good process for associations to vet AI software products they would like to introduce to their staff, especially if it's from a small company that they've maybe not heard of before?
Can't think of an answer.
I think there's a few things to mention, and I'll power a couple of broad points whilst you think of a well-informed one, John. But I think I think the key thing is to kind of understand, where is your data going when that tool is being utilized, right? You want to ensure that, it's that firstly that you have the the functionality within that tool to ensure that you're not going to have organizational data being incorporated into sort of large LLMs. I think you also, so from a safety aspect, I think that's really important. I think potentially from a portability aspect as well, that's something you need to consider. Quite a few AI tools they kind of have an LLM baked into them, so they'll either use Claude, they'll either use they'll use ChatGPT, they'll use Gemini. Now, as you progress up the AI maturity curve as an organization, the likelihood is you're going to get to a place where you will have an organizational account with a LLM supplier, for economies of scale and stuff like that. You don't want to be buying a few tokens over here and a few tokens over there. So yeah, ensuring that the tools you're looking at, you're able to potentially plug them into different LLMs if you're your organizational supplier of token supplier. I guess that's a thing now. If you want to change your supplier, then you have the ability to do so. So yeah, a couple of points from me.
Yeah, I think that last point's very important there, James, in the fact of that you don't want to buy and spread yourself out thin across lots of different tools. Probably what I was trying to think around before when I was stumped for words is like, personally, if it was me choosing software to use, I'd want it to be making use of, Claude, OpenAI, Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. I'd want it underneath the hood. I'd want it to be using one of the key players of an LLM, not some random, like DeepSeek or whatever the Twitter one's called nowadays. Can't remember what it's called.
Yeah. I think, yeah, girl.
I'd want all the systems that we're buying into that have AI capability to be plug and play with an LLM of choice, and for that choice to be under my control. And like you say, James, where I know I'm only paying into that LLM for my tokens, I'm not having to worry about one person over there consuming different tokens and different people being in charge of the finance of that.
Absolutely. Going to have to hurry us on to our final question, if that is okay. So final one from Laura. Looking forward to the next session. Thank you. One area that she'd love to explore further is how to measure AI impact beyond the obvious productivity gains. So before moving further with AI adoption, would we recommend establishing a baseline, for example, through a survey measuring employee satisfaction, confidence, and the percentage of AI-assisted workflows currently in use? As well as your suggested survey to capture how many people are currently using it and what it's fixing for them, etc. And are there any other metrics that we'd suggest tracking to demonstrate meaningful impact over time?
Well, we've just had a survey and I'm trying to desperately remember what stats we put into it. But yeah, I think when we've done this Umbraco, it's mainly about giving a bit of training up front, showing people how to use these things, and then doing surveys afterwards to see how it's impacted. I think it's about, I think one of the things that we've done quite a lot is let people get enthused about it. So we've done like show and tell sessions where you can come along and you can show what you've been playing around with and really share how far you've got with it, and it seems to be a really good thing to be able to do because people get really excited about this stuff, and that's a really good thing. Yeah.
I think just a couple of quick points for me. I think other things that are really key to measure. Ultimately, what is the effects that AI should be having within your organization? Ultimately, it should be making your staff's workday easier, or helping to augment their kind of existing workflows, and it should help to improve productivity as well. So I think keeping an eye on those two things is really important. I think the other thing to consider is kind of the front end, the member experience. You want to gauge how the introduction of AI tools, both in the back end, when you're building your content and producing content and stuff like that, but also any tooling you potentially kind of apply to the front end of that member experience. You want to understand how utilizing those tools is helping to either improve or not improve the member experience, because ultimately that's that's why we're all here.
But I think that actually measuring impact starts with setting appropriate goals or hypotheses in the first instance. So it's not implementing AI and crossing your fingers that there's going to be an impact to actually measure. It's actually implementing AI with the intention of, improving this functionality or improving, this over here. So that you're actually tracking that from the very beginning.
I think also it's about identifying things that can be done better by AI and seeing how we can manage those things. I think that's really, really important to do.
Yeah, definitely on them last points. Because like one thing we doing internally with our devs. So I've got a little working group of the AI specialists, for a better word, where we're all learning the tool, exploring the tool, and that people are coming to our little working group meetings with ideas. They're going away exploring them, putting together whatever's needed to actually make that a reality. As Danny says, with a clear goal in mind of a problem that they feel like it's going to solve. Bring that back to the group, have a conversation again, as Phil's commented before, a show and tell. Did it actually make a difference? Did it just get in the way? If it did make a difference, let's roll it out to the rest of the group and see does it make a difference to everybody, or is it because of the person that put it together is using it in a very specific manner? It's not transferable to other people. And what if it doesn't work for other people? Why? What can we change about it? Actually getting a bit more anecdotally as opposed to just surveys and things like that.
Shared learning, I think, is really important, and shared experimentation is really important within this.
Good stuff. I think that is just about everything for today. So thank you everyone again for your time today. We have run slightly over, but we appreciate you for tuning in nonetheless. And just to recap that our next session, the second in this series of 4 that we're running this year, will be all centered on real use cases of AI for membership organizations and professional associations. And that will be on Wednesday, the 13th of May. So we'll obviously post all of the details you need to know about that a little bit closer to the time. But yeah, thank you to you for joining. Thank you to our panelists as well. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.